Bloomberg Craig Trudell joins us now for more. Craig, this is quite a run. It's 10 days of gains. We're up by more than 40%. Bill Gross, the founder of PIMCO, coming out and saying it's trading like a meme stock. What are you hearing? What are you reporting on? What is happening with this name in this market?
It's hard to disagree with Mr. Gross. I think you look at what has happened to the fundamentals that he alluded to. Goldman may sort of look at the inventory clearing that we saw in the second quarter as positive, maybe some stabilization in the margins for this company. But those margins have been moving dramatically lower over the last year and a half as the company has significantly cut prices. And we have not seen, a sort of result of that being increases in deliveries. We've seen the company really over the last 7 quarters see very, very flat deliveries. So this is a growth company that is no longer growing, and real questions about where that growth is going to come from going forward if the company is unwilling to add to the lineup, which Elon Musk has given every indication that he doesn't want to expand the lineup, that he wants to continue to really leverage the Model 3 and the Model Y for the vast majority of this company's sales.
Well, you know what the carrot is now. It's August, and it's the robo-taxi business. We're talking about pricing a company for growth that doesn't have any. Craig, can that story turn that growth story around?
I think there's real reason to be skeptical there, just on the basis of, we look back at the years of experience we've been through with, Musk talking about this and putting this on the drawing board. You go back to 2016 when he was really first talking about this idea of trying to make this a business, of putting self-driving vehicles on the road, a shared fleet of them, Tesla, running that fleet, managing it as a sort of Uber competitor. And this was all something that was on the drawing board way back in 2016, and really executing that has proven extremely difficult. And you look at this sort of segment leader in Waymo, they are making really remarkable progress of late in making their service available more to the public, but scaling that business has been a real slog, and they've really focused on particular markets, whereas Tesla has set a much higher bar for itself with wanting to do sort of general purpose autonomy. So how exactly they square that circle is really going to be something to watch on August 8th when Musk has scheduled this unveiling for.
I think you're very diplomatically sort of doing the collective head scratch that we all are in terms of why now, in terms of this rally that we're seeing in Tesla stock. This actually adding to that collective head scratching, given the fact that there is a report citing Cox Automotive research showing that Tesla's share of electric vehicles in the U.S. has fallen below 50% in the second quarter. They've lost ground to General Motors, Ford, Hyundai, and Kia, all of them actually gaining on them in terms of their EV sales, even as collectively there seems to be some steam lost. How much of a hurdle do they have at a time where a lot of companies might have de-emphasized the EV, but are still gaining share and creating a buyer base?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for Tesla to go, below 50% is a pretty significant milestone. It's sort of been assumed that this company was not only, dominating the EV market, but going to continue to dominate it, sort of in perpetuity. And I do think that you do hear from some people that this is maybe kind of part of the plan, this idea that the EV market is going to get more and more competitive, that Musk doesn't necessarily want to play that game, that he wants to sort of, take this great big leap. And I think that may be all well and good and be the sort of thing that you would expect of a disruptive company. But I think people underappreciate just how difficult it's going to be to get a car to where, you don't need any human behind the wheel. And I think we need to look no further than all of the money that Google has pumped into this effort for years and really done this in sort of, step-by-step fashion. Musk, as we know, is not one to really sort of be patient, work well with regulators. And this is an industry where, one accident, one collision with a pedestrian or with a vehicle that results in fatalities can lead to you no longer being able to operate on the roads that you've been on. And so we've seen that from Uber, we've seen that from Cruise. And, I don't think necessarily that there's a reason to think that Musk is going to suddenly sort of change his ways and work better with the authorities who will give him the green light at least initially on the basis of the promise that this technology offers.
Craig, do we talk too much about Tesla simply because Elon Musk is such a firebrand? I mean, he's sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the room. Tesla shares are up 5.6%. I just looked at General Motors shares. They're up almost 30% year to date. I mean, how much has sort of the drama around Elon Musk and Tesla overshadowed some of the gains that some of the other auto manufacturers have made?
It is a really interesting question, and I do think that some of the gains that you're seeing among some of these other automotive names has actually been on the basis of, these companies have been spending sort of like drunken sailors to try and catch up to Tesla, and maybe it's not the best use of capital. Maybe we would be better off actually, getting some of that back in the form of a dividend and a buyback. And I think, those shareholder returns actually is a big sort of factor behind GM. But I think the reason we do talk so much about this company, you want to talk about the 10-day run that this stock has been on. I mean, it's added $250 billion worth of market cap over that stretch. And that's, multiples of what some of these other companies are worth. And so, do they get talked about an awful lot, really, until everyone's blue in the face? Absolutely. But it is, for good reason, in the sense that we just don't see these sorts of moves in terms of, market cap gains among anyone else in this space.
Craig, I want to ask you about the tariff hurdle, because rival BYD signed this deal to start now producing EVs in Turkey. Is this a way they can sidestep the tariffs that Europe has put on? And is this something potentially Musk should start doing?
I mean, they're not only setting up in Turkey, as you've alluded to, but also in Hungary. So they've already started work on a plant in Hungary. I do think it's really interesting in the sense that the Chinese car makers have had these big ambitions to crack the European market. They've done so in a way to try and avoid the scrutiny that they ultimately weren't able to avoid, in the sense that even making bits of progress in cracking this market was enough to really set off alarm bells in Brussels, and so we have seen these tariffs put into place. This would be a way around those by setting up local production, and I do think that this is an underappreciated risk to Tesla, in the sense that the Shanghai plant, as of a couple of years ago, became the export base from which Tesla, really tried to leverage, and to a great degree here in Europe, where they have localized Model Y production in Germany, but the vast majority of the Model 3s they get for this region come from Shanghai. And so those are at risk of real pain in the form of these tariffs that are coming into play in the coming months.